everyone, and welcome back to this week's Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I'm joined by Dr. Ashleigh Morland. And today we're continuing our talk on law, not as in like law degrees or, justice and all of that. We're just talking about the concepts from last week. And if you haven't seen last week's, go check that out, about universal truths, universal laws. And we covered quite a few last week. And
we covered 4. Last week we did cause and effect, the law of attraction, law of vibration, and law of correspondence.
There we go. And this week, Ash, we are covering
law of polarity, law of rhythm, and hopefully we get to law of perpetual transmutation of energy.
Wow. And then how many would be left after that?
3.
Ooh,
so come back next week. This is a 3-parter.
I gotta say foreshadowing. There's going to be a third one. So, out of all of those, are we going to go one by one, or can I just jump in and say, let's talk about the law of polarity, because I love that one.
Polarity, yeah, absolutely. Let's do this one.
Yeah.
So this is everything has an opposite. Changes create contrast, and contrast teaches clarity. I love this. I love this law. Don't like it in practice, but love it.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, I say no, but like the polarity side of things, like every coin has 2 sides. And, and when people say there's always 2 sides to a story, they can be weaponized. But for me, when I think about the law of polarity, it's like you think about creation, you think about the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, and how these things come together to create something which is much bigger and grander than just one. And that's the thing that I sort of love about it. And I suppose the contrast to the contrast has been, over time, one side has been incredibly celebrated while the other side has been poo-pooed.
Absolutely.
So let's sort of take, inequality. Let's sort of take the division when it comes to races or sexual preferences and all of that. There's been a huge weaponization from, quite a way back, but now we're coming into this sort of sense of unity going forward. And you've got, let's just sort of say, toxic masculinity. This is the one that I really do like, because it does exist. A wounded masculine has all of these traits. However, in the past, the masculine way of doing things, it was always celebrated first and foremost. If you want to get ahead in life, you got to strategize. You got to, compartmentalize. You got to do this, you got to do that. And it's all about upbeat and moving forward and all of that, as opposed to, imagine people being taught to be receptive, to be kind, to be flowing, to be nurturing, and you will get ahead in life. Imagine that 30 years ago. They'd be like, what the hell are you talking about?
And never assuming right versus wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can, like, the thing about the law of polarity is, like, they both exist. You need the dark. The dark only exists, light can only exist in dark.
That's right.
You need to deconstruct things to construct things.
Yeah. There's so many examples of that. You can't know. This is the one that in my experience, people struggle with the most. Out of all the universal laws I see applied, this is the one people struggle with the most, because we want to label things as bad. No one wants to experience dysregulation. But unless you've experienced dysregulation, you can't know what regulation feels like. Even as a university lecturer for many, many years, we would often have students who would go out on placement, and then they would come back and they'd be like, I feel like I just completely wasted my time and that placement sucked and I didn't enjoy it at all. And they would be really, really holding resentment and frustration. And I would say, that's awesome. And they'd go, no, it's not. It was terrible. And I'd go, no, because now you know what you don't want. And that's so important. Recently I saw someone having expressing their dissatisfaction with a sales process they had gone through in a high ticket offer. And they were struggling with this law of polarity because they were like, they were pushy and they were this and they were that and they shouldn't have said this and they shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, okay, yes, not for a second saying that what they did was appropriate, but let's look at law of polarity, because as a business owner, without having embodied that experience, you never would have had clarity on understanding the way that you want to do sales, the way you want people to feel, the journey you want to lead them on. And that's polarity. Most people will get stuck in their whinging about the negative experiences, but their growth and their evolution is in seeing what is the teaching, what is the wisdom, what is the lessons, the growth, the learning in those experiences and in suffering and hardship, because that is law of polarity in action. That teaches us clarity, gives us clarity on what we do want by showing us what we don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I mean, that's the balance of it all. Can you imagine everything just being one-sided? And like, especially in the, we'll say the new age spiritual thinking, there's a lot of focus put into just love and light. Mm-hmm. And I agree, there's a lot that you want to do in that space. But if it's the only space that you can work in, then there's a bit of an issue. And it's sort of like, you don't have to, like, positivity is something to strive for. But for it to be the only thing that happens in your life, well, you got to ask yourself, is there a potential? And I know we throw the word toxic around a lot, but toxic positivity. And sort of like, okay, well, what is darkness? What is your shadow work? What's the purpose of it all? There is a purpose. It's here for a reason. Like, nothing's by mistake. It's here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an opportunity to have the two options, the two polarities, and to navigate your way through it. Because if there was only ever one side of the coin, you don't have any choice. It's just that.
That's right.
And so this whole thing about, and I know I won't try not to go down the free will rabbit hole, but to be able to do that, you actually have the choice to decide which one you're sort of going to gravitate to. Now, some people might gravitate to the light only because they're scared of the dark.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, okay, I can only focus on that. And it's actually, they're being driven by the dark. They're not being driven by the light.
Yeah.
They're being driven away to one side. So we just had a little special guest. So it's embracing those two sides of you. 100%. The shadow, the light, the masculine, the feminine. Like, and this is a big one for me. We all have the two in us. And when we can balance out a bit more of one and the other to truly understand where we sort of sit in our homeostasis, like for me, definitely more masculine, but to be able to flow into my feminine states when I need to has actually allowed me to become a greater, more grounded masculine. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at relationships, and especially my romantic relationships going forward, I'm looking for that complement, which is a divine feminine, as opposed to a partner who's in their divine masculine, right? So again, trying to allow those two things to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. We are different but equal. Mm. But again, sort of knowing, and again, what you said before, I can figure out what I want by experiencing what I don't want.
Yeah.
Hell of a lot nicer to know what I want by experiencing what I want. But with experiences going on these days.
Absolutely. And this is, again, the distortion and the frequency of fear. I see a lot in parents who are trying to protect their kids from having what they consider bad, harmful, scary, sad, negative experiences, because they don't want their kids to experience suffering. They don't want their kids to experience challenge. And although I can understand the sentiment of that, and although as a parent I can struggle with this sometimes as well, where there is a lot of wisdom that comes from allowing your child to, I guess, in an age-appropriate way and not putting them specifically in harm's way, but
Yes.
encouraging and giving space for your child to experience experiences, not protect them from scary ones or bad ones or anything else, but actually just letting go of the reins and trusting that if you've done the work and if you're in a frequency of love and there is emotional and psychological safety, that your child, even if they experience a negative thing, can come back to you and you can regulate with them. You can guide them through this this polarity, because it's things like I don't let my kids watch these movies because what if they're taught stuff that I don't believe in? Well, it's not the watching of the movies that's the threat.
It's what they do with it.
It's what they do and how the narrative. And that's where open and honest communication and conversation, if I fear my kids being exposed to something, then, and I just go and try and protect them by making sure they can never, ever be exposed to it. Well, that's actually trying to manipulate and weaponize the law of polarities for my own comfort. Whereas if I can equip my kids to be emotionally and psychologically mature enough, I suppose, or equipped enough to be able to bear witness to things, observe how those things feel for them, and then be able to move through that, then they're going to reach the conclusions themselves in a healthier, empowered way. So they're not like not listening to, dodgy music just because I told them don't listen to the dodgy music. It's about allowing them to experience, but then I guess coaching and guiding them to observe how listening to that music feels for them and what alternative could they feel. And if they feel that way when they do that thing, but they want to feel this way instead, then what would need to happen for them to feel that way? And this is the application of all of these laws in practice. So I see that kind of playing out where people are afraid of the law of polarity because they want to avoid challenge and suffering. But by trying to prevent challenge and suffering, we're doing a disservice, because the clarity that comes of sense of self, the clarity that comes of our preferences and our certainties around what feels good and aligned for us and what doesn't, and all these kinds of things, we're not experiencing that from our own lived experience. We're doing it from a place of compliance and obedience.
And I'll come back to what you were saying before about protecting kids. And I've seen firsthand that what comes from a very loving space can be really quite traumatic.
Yeah.
Because what will end up happening if you decide to protect the child, from all of these experiences, for that to be successful, you have to absolutely guarantee that by the time they're an adult, that threat or that situation will never come up. Never. Now, the problem is that generally these songs won't go away. These movies don't go away. Social media sure as hell isn't going away. Technology, AI, that's not going away. All of these things aren't going away. So what I've seen firsthand is when you're not able to protect the child, because at some point as a parent, you have to let go of the children. The children are going to want to move out, or if they don't move out, there's, at some point, you're not going to be there to protect them. What happens to that person then? Well, guess what? They're just going to do an absolute ram raid crash course on all the lessons they've just missed out on.
Yeah, they're going to make all the mistakes as fast as possible.
But it's just going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just going bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
And while they catch up with, maybe 10, 20, 30 years worth of learning that they could have done and prepared for step by step by step by step.
Well, they had a soft landing pad.
Yep. And then when you do that, you then have an adult who is mentally not prepared to be an adult, which then adds another complication, which they don't feel as though they should be an adult.
Yeah.
And then the resentment kicks in. Why did this happen? Why did you let me get to this point? Why did you take all of these learnings away from me?
Yeah.
Or why aren't you still protecting me now?
Yeah.
Like,
the number of times parents say with devastation after their adult children are upset with them is, I was just trying to help.
Or how dare you take what I've done and throw it back in my face?
Yeah, I was just trying to help. And sometimes it's about recognizing that by helping and over-helping, we're preventing the other person from experiencing the fullness of an experience they needed to be able to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And so by preventing their suffering for our own reasons of wanting to not feel uncomfortable observing someone suffer, we've actually held them back. And that's a really, really, really hard thing to confront.
And there was a quote that I got that hit home, not mine, but I saw it on my my favorite place to get information, which is TikTok, which was the saying that, and this is for a child, if looking forward feels difficult or challenging, then look beside you because you'll know I'll be right there.
Yeah, I love that.
And to me, that's sort of like, wow. It's like, I can't stop what's going ahead in your life, but just know you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I had this, it was a confronting conversation with my son who's turning 12 soon. And I found it really difficult because I don't know what's taught at school. Like, I don't know how far in depth they've been taught about sex and about, adult topics. And I was really open and honest with him. And I said, hey, mate, do you have capacity to have a really open and honest conversation? And I'm just going to warn you, it might feel a little bit awkward or uncomfortable, but I think it's really important that we chat about this. And he was like, yeah, okay, reluctantly. Anyway, one of the things that we talked about was to notice how certain things feel in your body. And I said, have you ever had conversations or any kids ever brought anything up or ever seen anything where you just feel really uncomfortable in your body? And it's like your body goes either into embarrassment or fear or anything like that, because it's like something inside you knows you don't want to be looking at that, or you're not ready to talk about that or whatever. And he actually said yes. And when he was at his previous school, some kids were talking about some content. And he said he realizes now that they were talking about them as concepts, but no one really knew what they were. Like, no one really understood it. But it was such an awesome conversation because that's exactly what we talked about. And I said to him, learning to listen to what's happening in your body and observing that this feels uncomfortable and this feels like whatever. But I did say to him, if you're ever feeling those things, if you have questions, can we have an agreement that you come to us about it? Please don't go to the internet for your answers. Because
you'll find answers on the internet that might not be to the questions that you're asking.
Well, that's it. And the thing is, and I said, there's going to be things that you see that you can never unsee. There's going to be things that you read about, like you can't, there's no filter for what that can show up. And if you come to us, we can answer your questions openly and honestly. We can help you move through those chaotic feelings in your body, but without the risk of harm to you. And I said, I will always be honest and I will always support you to understand or answer your questions. But I said, it's kind of like going to the internet and typing in, what's this lump on my arm? And Google says it's cancer and you're going to be dead in a week. When
that's an answer, yeah.
Yeah, but it has no other context and it doesn't know, because it's not that deep connected relational thing. It's not really looking at it. It hasn't done an assessment. It hasn't assessed the risks. And so I said, like, for me, I'm not necessarily trying to control his conversations or his whatever else, but I want him to know that through those challenges, we're with him. And that is one of the most protective things that parents can do is not to try and be overprotective of preventing the experiences, but by being willing to have open and honest conversations that supports the clarity that they can get on the other side of those experiences. And if there's that safety there for kids to go to their parents and to feel seen and heard, and to know that they're never going to be shamed, or that they don't have to be in trouble for asking questions, but you can be a safe landing pad, that's how you healthily implement this law of polarity rather than fear it.
And look, again, when it comes to parents, kids, social media, online gaming, chats, internet, like, kids are going to experience all of that at some point in time, somehow, some way. And it's not about fearing. Like, there's a lot of crap, a lot of great stuff on that, but a lot of crap. And to, a mind that is potentially not ready can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But kids shouldn't be scared of it. But I think it's really important what you're saying there, that it's sort of like, if there's something in particular that you're going to the internet for that you can't come to us about, think about why that might be. What is it that you're feeling? Yeah. Because chances are, we've experienced it before. And if you don't think we have, try us.
Yeah.
Or if there's something that you want to check, let's check it together. Let's. So it's not about sort of going, you can't do that, because technology, information overload, AI, all of that, you can imagine project in 15, 20 years' time, how much information, how much noise is going to be out there. It's going to be huge.
Exactly.
And for the kids that aren't getting technology now, I could almost feel in my bones that there's going to be conditions in the future which is going to come around a technological anxiety. They just can't keep up because it's just everything's moving along and society's going rum, 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 rum. And the kids that haven't been exposed to any of it are just going to have to learn really quickly to either go completely off grid or learn how to
embrace it,
regulate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through all of that.
I hear you on that.
But we're going to have to keep this one short, unfortunately, Ash. And we're going to have to pick up the next laws in the next episode. But damn, I've got to say, from one comment, this 3-part series, I'm thoroughly enjoying.
It's been a fascinating conversation, isn't it?
It is. Just because the different things, it just sort of takes you on different paths. And look, people, this is not exhaustive about the laws. And you might have other laws. And the thing about these universal laws and truths, they're still being uncovered. So, like, if you're resonating with it, great. If you're not, great, but let us know in the comments. We might be able to talk about something else in future episodes. And
we could do an entire 10-part series just on universal laws in parenting alone. And then we could do an entire, it just runs so deep, and exploring the applications and having the conversations around it. There is so much to discuss, and I'm sitting here, my brain's going, I need to create a course on this.
I'm just thinking, Ash, if you could just update the spreadsheet and batch. I'm just looking over the spreadsheet overview. For those of you who haven't seen it, maybe last week's episode.
Working with your brain instead of against it. Yeah, that's a funny one.
Just go back to that, and as long as there's batching and color coding and spreadsheets.
Order, yes.
Yep.
Love some order.
That would be Ash's law of universal order. We'll call it that.
Alrighty, friends. Well, thank you for joining us today. And we went so deep into that law of polarity that we didn't get to the other ones today, but we will record however many episodes it takes to get through them. And
it's super important.
It is, and it's interesting.
Polarity,
it's fascinating. Polarity is the one that everyone struggles with the most. So,
well, in my
everything
mind,
else will feel easier.
This existence where we're all living now is to really explore polarity and duality.
Yes.
And for me, it's my personal opinion. Let me know what you think yours is. But and that's why I think it's been great that unintentionally we had one just on polarity. So that's pretty
absolutely cool. Awesome.
Till next week.
Great to join you again, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.